When the All-Father of Asgard crashes onto a Mechanicus forge world, the Inquisition sees only heresy, and they're prepared to execute a god who ruled for millennia before humanity even existed. But what happens when Odin stands before the Emperor of mankind and refuses to kneel? Who will remain the last one standing? The sky above Metallicus Prime split open like a wound torn through reality itself. Not the familiar crimson bleeding of a warp breach, but something else entirely. Rainbow light, brilliant and terrible, carved a burning scar across the night. The Forge World's sensor arrays shrieked with data that made no sense. Energy readings that exceeded Titan plasma reactors. Dimensional distortions that defied every law the Adeptus Mechanicus held sacred. Fabricator General Valdric stood in his cathedral forge, augmented eyes whirring as they struggled to process the impossible phenomenon unfolding overhead. "By the Omnissiah," he whispered through his vox grill, his mechanical voice crackling with something his human components had nearly forgotten. Fear. The light condensed, focused, became a single point of brilliance that fell like a meteor toward the planet's surface. It struck the Grand Manufactorum with the force of an orbital bombardment. Adamantium walls 3 meters thick crumpled like parchment. Ancient machinery, blessed and maintained for 5,000 years, shattered into fragments. The impact crater was 50 meters wide and still glowing with residual energy when the tech priests reached it. At the center lay a man. He was ancient beyond measure, yet his body radiated strength that put even the Astartes to shame. His armor was gold and silver, etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. A cloak of deep blue hung from his broad shoulders, somehow untouched by the destruction around him. In his right hand he clutched a spear that hummed with power so intense it caused the air around it to ripple and distort. Most striking of all was his face, weathered and wise, with a golden eye patch covering his right eye. The left eye that remained blazed with an intelligence that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Odin, son of Bor, All-Father of Asgard, opened that eye and beheld a world he did not recognize. Tech priests swarmed the crater's edge, their mechanical augmentations clicking and whirring as they recorded every detail. Servo skulls buzzed overhead, their sensor equipment focused on the stranger. Skitarii soldiers, half-human warriors bound to the Mechanicus through cybernetic enhancement, formed a perimeter with their radium carbines raised and ready. Fabricator General Valdric descended into the crater on mechanized legs, his robes trailing behind him. 17 of his original organs had been replaced with superior mechanical components over his 2 centuries of service. His brain was augmented with 3 processing units that allowed him to calculate faster than any unmodified human. Yet standing before this golden figure, he felt like a child gazing upon something beyond comprehension. "Identify yourself," Valdric commanded, his voice amplified through external speakers. "You have violated the sacred forge halls of Metallicus Prime. Explain your presence or face immediate termination." Odin rose to his feet with fluid grace. He stood 7 feet tall, towering over the Fabricator General. His one eye swept across the assembled forces, taking in every detail with a warrior's instinct honed over millennia. These were not the mortals of Midgard, he remembered. These were something new. Something changed. Their flesh was merged with metal in ways that reminded him of the dwarven smiths of Nidavellir, yet corrupted somehow, made desperate and grim. "I am Odin," he said, his voice carrying across the crater without need for amplification. Each word resonated with power that made the very air tremble. "Son of Bor, king of Asgard, father of Thor, I have ruled my realm for 5,000 of your mortal years. I seek answers, not conflict." The tech priests fell silent. Their instruments recorded the impossible. His voice created harmonic frequencies that should not exist in normal space. The spear in his hand registered energy outputs that exceeded theoretical maximums. His body temperature was precisely 98.6 degrees, perfectly human, yet scans showed bone density 3 times that of adamantium and muscle fibers that defied biological categorization. "The Omnissiah," one tech priest whispered, falling to his mechanical knees. "The machine god walks among us." Others followed, their cybernetic joints hissing as they prostrated themselves before Odin. Within minutes, half the assembled Mechanicus forces had declared the stranger a divine manifestation. Their prayers filled the air, binary cant mixing with high Gothic in desperate supplication. Valdric remained standing, his enhanced mind racing through possibilities. "You claim kingship," he said carefully. Yet you arrive uninvited, through means unknown, wielding technology beyond our comprehension. These are the marks of either divinity or deception. Before Odin could respond, new alarms blared across the Forge world, orbital defense platforms locked onto targets at the system's edge. Valdric's internal communications flooded with urgent reports. His mechanical face twisted into something approaching horror. Tyranids, he breathed. Hive Fleet Jormungandr has translated into the system. Odin's eye narrowed at the name. Jormungandr. The world serpent of his own mythology, the beast destined to poison the sky during Ragnarok. Coincidence or something more sinister at work? Through the breached walls of the cathedral forge, he could see the sky darkening, not with clouds or night, but with living vessels that defied sanity. Bioships the size of Imperial cruisers descended through the atmosphere, their chitinous hulls dripping acid that burned through the air itself. Smaller creatures swarmed from their flanks, millions of them blotting out the stars. The Skitarii opened fire immediately, their weapons flashing in the darkness. Radium rounds and plasma bolts tore into the descending swarm. Some creatures fell, their alien flesh burning, but for every one that died, 10 more took its place. The hungry tide of the hive mind pushed forward with single-minded determination. Fall back to secondary positions, Valdric commanded through the Vox network. Activate defense servitors. The forge must be protected at all costs. Odin watched the approaching swarm with a warrior's eye. He had fought countless battles across the 9 realms. He had led armies against frost giants and dark elves. He had stood against Surtur himself in the depths of Muspelheim. This enemy was different in form, but the hunger in their approach was familiar. This was predation in its purest form, life-consuming life without mercy or hesitation. You cannot stop them with your weapons alone, Odin said, his voice cutting through the chaos. I sense their purpose. They seek to devour everything, to add your flesh and knowledge to their collective. Then we die defending the forge, Valdric replied. The Omnissiah's works must not fall into Xenos' hands. Odin gripped Gungnir tightly. The spear responded to his will, ancient runes along its shaft beginning to glow with golden light. I did not survive the journey between realms to watch another world fall to mindless hunger. He launched himself skyward without warning or visible means of propulsion, simply rose into the air as if gravity itself had no claim upon him. The assembled tech priests gasped in wonder and terror, their instruments overloaded trying to explain the phenomenon. Odin ascended like a golden comet, trailing light behind him. The first wave of Tyranid organisms reached him at 2,000 meters altitude. Gargoyles, flying creatures with leathery wings and bioweapons fused to their flesh, swarmed around him in a living cloud. Their shrieks filled the air, coordinated by the hive mind's terrible intelligence. Odin spun Gungnir in a perfect arc. The spear's path carved a line of golden fire through the swarm. Where it passed, Tyranid flesh simply ceased to exist, unmade by forces beyond biology or physics. The gargoyles fell from the sky like rain, their bodies dissolving before they hit the ground. But more came. Always more. The Tyranids knew no fear, no hesitation. They threw themselves at the golden figure with suicidal determination, each death feeding information back to the hive mind, helping it learn and adapt. Odin's eye blazed with power. The Odin force, the cosmic energy that was his birthright as All-Father, surged through him. He raised his free hand and spoke a word in a language older than human civilization. The air around him ignited with golden lightning. Not the crude electricity of this world's weapons, but pure cosmic force given visible form. The lightning branched outward in all directions, each bolt finding a target with impossible precision. Hundreds of Tyranid organisms died in an instant, their alien nervous systems overloaded by energy they had no defense against. The larger bioships began evasive maneuvers, but Odin moved faster. He flew directly at the nearest vessel, a creature the size of a city block covered in armored plates and weapon symbiotes. Gungnir struck the bioship's hull. The impact created a shockwave that shattered windows across half the Forge world. The ship's armor, which could withstand lance strikes from Imperial cruisers, parted like cloth. Odin drove the spear deep into the creature's core, finding the central ganglion that served as its brain. The bioship screamed, a psychic wail that caused every human on the planet below to clutch their heads in pain. Then it died, its massive body going limp as it began its terminal descent toward the wasteland beyond the Forge city. On the ground, Fabricator General Valdric watched through augmented eyes as this impossible stranger single-handedly accomplished what would have required an entire Imperial Navy battle group. 3 more bioships fell in the next 10 minutes, each one torn apart by combinations of spearwork and cosmic lightning that defied every law of warfare the Mechanicus held sacred. The remaining Tyranid forces began to retreat, pulling back toward the system's edge. The hive mind had calculated the cost of continued assault and found it unacceptable. This world now held something it could not easily consume. Odin descended as the last of the Xenos vanished into the void. He landed in the crater where he had first arrived, Gungnir still crackling with residual energy. His armor was unmarked despite the battle. Not even a scratch marred its ancient surface. The tech priests prostrated themselves once more, their prayers growing louder. But Valdric noticed something else arriving at the crater's edge. New figures in black armor marked with the symbol of the Inquisition. At their head walked a woman whose augmented eyes glowed with cold intelligence. Inquisitor Thorn of the Ordo Xenos had arrived, and her hand rested on the bolt pistol at her hip. Inquisitor Thorn stood at the crater's edge, her black carapace armor gleaming in the light of Metallicus Prime's twin moons. The stylized eye of the Inquisition was emblazoned across her breastplate in silver, a symbol that carried more authority than entire armies. Behind her, a squad of stormtroopers held their hellguns ready, their discipline absolute. She studied Odin with eyes that had witnessed horrors that would break lesser minds, and her expression revealed nothing. "I am Inquisitor Thorn of the Ordo Xenos," she announced, her voice sharp as a blade. "By the authority of the God Emperor of mankind, you will identify yourself and submit to immediate examination. Failure to comply will result in your immediate execution." Odin turned his single eye upon her, and for a moment Thorn felt the weight of ages pressing down upon her consciousness. This was not the gaze of a man, but of something far older, far more dangerous. Yet she had faced down demon princes and lived to report their banishment. She would not falter before this golden stranger, no matter how powerful he appeared. "I have already given my name," Odin replied calmly. "I am Odin, king of Asgard. I saved your world from the swarm. I ask only for knowledge of where I am and how I might return to my realm." "You claim kingship," Thorn said, taking 3 measured steps down into the crater. Her stormtroopers followed in perfect formation. "Yet the only true ruler of mankind is the God Emperor. Blessed be his name. No being holds authority in Imperial space without his sanction. Your demonstration of power only confirms what I suspected from the moment I received reports of your arrival. You are either Xenos pretending to be human, or something worse." Fabricator General Valdric stepped forward, his mechanical voice urgent. "Inquisitor, with respect, this being saved our Forge world. Without his intervention, millions of lives and irreplaceable standard template construct fragments would have been lost to the Tyranids. Surely that counts for something." "It counts for tactical patience," Thorn replied coldly. "Many Xenos species use apparent aid as camouflage for deeper infiltration. The Harud appear harmless until they age entire populations to death. The Rangdan seemed reasonable until they enslaved billions. I will not risk another such catastrophe based on a single act of violence against another Xenos threat." Odin's jaw tightened. He had ruled Asgard through wisdom and strength, had made decisions that saved countless lives across the 9 realms. To be spoken to as if he were some common threat ignited a fury in his chest that he forced down through sheer will. Anger solved nothing. He had learned that lesson over millennia. "I understand your caution," he said, each word carefully chosen. "In my realm, we too face threats from beyond our borders. The frost giants of Jotunheim, the dark elves of Svartalfheim, entities that would see Asgard fall into darkness. Trust must be earned, not freely given. I accept this, but know that I am no servant, no supplicant. I am a king, and I have been a king since before your ancestors learned to forge their first tools." The audacity of the statement sent ripples through the assembled forces. Stormtroopers shifted nervously. Tech priests muttered prayers to the machine god. Even Thorn's augmented eyes widened slightly before her iron discipline reasserted itself. "Heresy," she said quietly. "You claim age that predates humanity itself. You position yourself above the Emperor in both power and authority. These are grounds for immediate execution." She drew her bolt pistol in one fluid motion, the ornate weapon inlaid with gold scripture and purity seals. At this range, even a single bolt round would explode with enough force to destroy an armored vehicle. The stormtroopers raised their hell guns, targeting arrays painting Odin with a dozen red dots. Odin did not move. He simply stood, Gungnir planted before him like a staff, and regarded the Inquisitor with something approaching pity. If you believe that weapon can harm me, child, then you understand nothing of what I am. But I will not fight you. Too much blood has been spilled already today. I propose instead that I accompany you to whoever leads your Imperium. Let your Emperor judge me himself if he is worthy of such a title. For a long moment silence hung over the crater. Thorn's finger rested on the trigger, but something stayed her hand. She had survived decades in the Inquisition by trusting her instincts, and those instincts now screamed conflicting messages. This being was dangerous, that much was certain. But the way he spoke, the absolute confidence without arrogance, the acceptance of judgment rather than demand for worship, these were not the marks of chaos, corruption, or Xenos deception. "Lower your weapons," she commanded finally. The stormtroopers obeyed instantly, though confusion flickered across their faces. "You will accompany me to Terra. You will submit to psychic examination during the journey. Any resistance, any deviation from my commands, and I will call down an orbital strike on our position. The Emperor's judgment you shall have, stranger. I only pray you survive to receive it." Odin inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement between equals rather than submission. "I accept your terms." The journey to Terra took 3 weeks through the warp, that impossible realm of psychic energy and madness that connected the scattered stars of the Imperium. Odin had been assigned quarters aboard the inquisitorial vessel Eternal Vigilance, a sleek cruiser painted black as the void itself. His room was comfortable but clearly designed as much for containment as hospitality. Reinforced walls, a single sealed door, and constant surveillance from hidden recorders. He spent the first days in meditation, reaching out with his senses to understand this strange new reality. The warp pressed against the ship's gellar fields like a hungry predator, and Odin could feel things moving in those psychic currents. Ancient things, terrible things, entities that whispered promises of power and knowledge to any mind foolish enough to listen. On the 5th day, the whispers found him. They came during his sleep, sliding through his dreams like serpents through water. Voices speaking in languages he should not understand, yet somehow did. They offered him answers to questions he had not yet asked. They showed him visions of Asgard, his golden realm, burning in the fires of Ragnarok while he remained trapped in this distant reality, unable to save his people. "You seek wisdom, All-Father," the voices hissed. "We can provide it. We can show you the way home. We can give you the knowledge to prevent the twilight of the gods. All we ask is that you listen, that you learn, that you accept our generous gifts." Odin opened his eye in the darkness of his quarters. The whispers did not cease with waking. They continued, growing louder, more insistent. He recognized their nature immediately. These were not mere dreams or hallucinations. These were deliberate intrusions from something vast and intelligent, dwelling in the warp itself. "I know what you are," he said aloud to the empty room. "I have dealt with Loki's trickery for millennia. I have resisted the temptations of dark elves and the honeyed words of giants who would see Asgard fall. Your offers are old, tired things dressed in new clothing. You promise wisdom but deliver only corruption. You speak of knowledge but offer only slavery." The whispers grew angry, their tone shifting from seductive to threatening. Images filled his mind of ways he could die, tortures that would break even his ancient body, eternal imprisonment in realms of pure madness. But Odin had hung from Yggdrasil itself, pierced by Gungnir for 9 days and nights to gain the knowledge of the runes. He had plucked out his own eye and cast it into Mimir's well to see beyond the present moment. Pain and sacrifice were old friends, not weapons to be wielded against him. "Be gone," he commanded, and the Odin force surged through him. Golden light filled his quarters, burning away the psychic intrusion like sunlight through morning fog. The whispers shrieked and fled, retreating back into the warp's depths. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Within seconds, Inquisitor Thorn burst through his door, bolt pistol drawn, her stormtroopers flooding in behind her. They found Odin sitting calmly on his bed, the golden light fading from his skin, his expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. "What happened?" Thorn demanded. "Our sensors detected massive psychic activity emanating from this room. Explain yourself immediately." "Something in your warp tried to corrupt me," Odin replied simply. "It failed. The entities dwelling in that realm are powerful, I grant them that much. But I have resisted corruption longer than your Imperium has. Existed, They will need to try harder. Thorn studied him carefully, her augmented eyes scanning for any sign of taint. She had seen strong-willed individuals fall to chaos corruption in moments, their souls twisted by whispers they never even knew they heard. Yet this stranger showed no sign of influence. If anything, he seemed mildly annoyed rather than tempted. "The entities of the warp are not mere threats to be dismissed," she said carefully. "They are the great enemy of mankind. The ruinous powers have destroyed entire civilizations, corrupted primarchs who were demigods in their own right. You claim resistance, but every being believes themselves strong until the moment they fall." "Then perhaps you should explain these powers to me," Odin suggested. "In my realm we have our own dark forces. Knowing the enemy's true nature is the first step to defeating them. Or do you prefer your people remain ignorant, relying only on faith to shield them from corruption?" It was a dangerous question, one that bordered on heresy. Yet Thorn found herself considering it seriously. The stranger made a valid point. The Imperium's policy of keeping knowledge secret had prevented countless corruptions, but it had also left many defenseless when they inevitably encountered chaos for the first time. She holstered her bolt pistol and dismissed her stormtroopers with a gesture. They filed out reluctantly, leaving her alone with Odin in his quarters. She sat on the single chair across from his bed, her posture remaining alert despite the casual appearance. "Very well," she said. "I will tell you of the ruinous powers, the four great enemies of mankind who dwell in the warp and seek to corrupt all sentient life." She spoke for over an hour, describing the nature of chaos. She explained Khorne, the blood god who fed on rage and violence; Tzeentch, the architect of fate who offered knowledge and change but delivered only manipulation and madness; Nurgle, the plague father who promised acceptance of mortality but spread disease and decay; Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure who whispered of perfection and sensation but delivered only excess and degradation. Odin listened carefully, his single eye never leaving her face. As she spoke, he began to see patterns, connections to threats he had faced in his own reality. The berserker rage of warriors who gave themselves wholly to battle, losing all other aspects of their being. The dangerous allure of forbidden knowledge that came with terrible prices. The acceptance of death that could become worship of decay itself. The pursuit of glory and perfection that twisted into obsession. "These powers you describe," he said when she finished, "they are aspects given form. Emotions and concepts made real through belief and worship. In my realm, we would call such things by other names, but the danger remains the same. They offer pieces of truth wrapped in lies, giving just enough reality to make the corruption palatable. You understand quickly," Thorn admitted, something like respect creeping into her voice. "Most who learn of chaos either fall to despair or refuse to believe the threat is real. You accept it as simply another enemy to be fought." "Because that is what they are," Odin replied. "I have faced Surtur, who wishes to burn all the 9 realms to ash. I have stood against Hela, who would drag all living things into her realm of death. These warp entities are more subtle, perhaps more insidious, but the fundamental nature is unchanged. They are predators, and we are their intended prey. The only question is whether we have the strength and wisdom to resist." Thorn leaned back in her chair, studying him with new eyes. "You speak of sacrifice for wisdom. What exactly did you sacrifice?" Odin reached up and removed his golden eye patch. The empty socket beneath was not simply hollow. Runes were carved into the flesh surrounding it, ancient symbols that glowed faintly with residual power. The sight was deeply unsettling, yet somehow noble in its purposeful mutilation. "I hung myself from the world tree," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of ancient pain. "Yggdrasil, the cosmic ash that connects all 9 realms. I pierced myself with my own spear and forbade anyone from aiding me. For 9 days and nights I hung there, suffering, dying, until I glimpsed the secrets hidden in the spaces between life and death. I learned the runes, the fundamental symbols that shape reality itself. And when I finally fell, I was forever changed." He replaced the eye patch carefully. "Later I gave my remaining eye to drink from Mimir's well, which grants vision beyond the present moment. The ability to see possible futures, to understand consequences before actions are taken. Each sacrifice brought wisdom, but also burden. Knowledge without the strength to bear it is worse than ignorance." Thorn sat in silence, processing what she had heard. In the Imperium, sacrifice was common, expected even. Guardsmen died by the millions in wars they barely understood. Tech priests replaced their flesh with machinery in pursuit of the Omnissiah's blessing. Even the Emperor himself sacrificed everything to maintain humanity's survival. But this was different. This was deliberate mutilation in pursuit of wisdom, not duty. The distinction was subtle but significant. "What has your Emperor sacrificed?" Odin asked, echoing her earlier thoughts. "You speak of him as a god, yet gods pay prices for their power. What did he give up to become what he is?" The question struck at the heart of Imperial theology. Thorn hesitated, aware that her answer would reveal much about the faith that sustained the Imperium. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. "Everything," she said simply. 10,000 years ago, during the Horus heresy, the Emperor fought his most beloved son, the Primarch Horus, who had fallen to chaos corruption. The battle nearly destroyed reality itself. When it ended, the Emperor was mortally wounded. His body was placed upon the Golden Throne, a device that keeps his physical form alive while his consciousness maintains the Astronomicon, a psychic beacon that allows humanity to navigate the warp. Without it, we would be isolated, divided, doomed. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But the throne requires fuel. 10,000 psychers are sacrificed daily to maintain its function. Their souls burn to feed the Emperor's light. He experiences their deaths, all of them, every single day for 10 millennia. He suffers eternally so that humanity might survive. That is the price he pays. Odin's expression grew grave. The scale of such sacrifice was staggering even to him. To endure that level of pain for so long, to maintain consciousness through such unending torment, required will beyond measure. Whatever else this Emperor might be, he was no false god demanding worship without cost. He paid in suffering that would break even the strongest mind. "Then I understand," Odin said slowly, "why you react with such hostility to any who might challenge his authority. He has earned your loyalty through sacrifice that none could question. But tell me this, Inquisitor. Does he still lead, or has his suffering reduced him to mere survival? Does he guide humanity toward a better future, or does he simply maintain the present against endless darkness?" It was a dangerous question, one that bordered on the kind of doubt that could lead to execution. Yet Thorn found herself unable to dismiss it. She had served the Emperor her entire adult life, had witnessed miracles performed in his name, had seen his will made manifest through saints and living saints. But had she ever seen evidence of forward progress? Or was the Imperium simply treading water against the tide, holding position but never advancing? "That is not for me to judge," she said finally. "I am but one servant among billions. My role is to identify and eliminate threats, not to question the Emperor's grand design." "And you believe I am such a threat?" "I believe you are something unprecedented," Thorn replied honestly. "You display power comparable to the Primarchs of legend. You resist chaos corruption as if it were nothing. You speak with the confidence of one who has ruled for longer than our recorded history. Whether you are threat or opportunity, only the Emperor himself can judge. That is why I am taking you to Terra, despite every instinct screaming that I should eliminate you now and worry about the consequences later." Before Odin could respond, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared throughout the corridors. Thorn's vox bead crackled with urgent reports from the bridge. Her face went pale beneath her augmented enhancements. "Impossible," she whispered. "We're under attack, in the warp itself." The ship shuddered again, and through the walls Odin could hear something that chilled even his ancient blood. Not the mindless hunger of the Tyranids, but deliberate, purposeful malevolence. Something was boarding the eternal vigilance, tearing through its hull despite the impossibility of physical matter existing in the warp's depths. Thorn was already moving, her bolt pistol drawn. "Stay here," she commanded. "Do not leave this room under any circumstances." But Odin was already on his feet, Gungnir materializing in his hand with a thought. "If something breaches your ship while traveling through that psychic realm, everyone aboard is in mortal danger. You need my help, Inquisitor, whether you wish to admit it or not." Their eyes met, hers filled with the trained suspicion of decades of service, his blazing with the certainty of a warrior who had faced death more times than she had drawn breath. Finally, Thorn nodded once. a curt acknowledgement of necessity overriding protocol. Together they ran toward the breach, where something ancient and terrible was forcing its way into reality, drawn by the presence of a king who had dared to reject the gifts of chaos itself. The breach was located in the lower cargo hold, a massive tear in reality itself where the ship's hull should have been solid adamantium. Through the wound, Odin could see the warp in its true form, not filtered through safe viewing ports or Geller field protection. It was madness given shape, an ocean of screaming colors that should not exist, geometries that hurt the eye to perceive. And underneath it all, hunger. Infinite, eternal hunger for the souls of living things. Pouring through the breach came the word-bearers, traitor space marines who had turned from the Emperor's light 10,000 years ago during the great betrayal known as the Horus Heresy. Their power armor was dark red, inscribed with symbols that writhed and changed when observed directly. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall in their corrupted ceramite, bearing weapons that crackled with warp energy. At their head strode a dark apostle, a priest of chaos whose very presence caused reality to weaken and fray. The ship's defenders met them with disciplined fire. Stormtroopers unleashed hellgun volleys that would have cut through tank armor. Servitors, half-human machines lobotomized and programmed for combat, fired heavy bolters that sent explosive rounds downrange at devastating rates. Yet the word-bearers advanced through the storm of fire with contemptuous ease. Their armor absorbed hits that should have killed them. Where rounds did penetrate, corrupted flesh beneath knitted back together almost instantly. For the dark gods, the word-bearers chanted in unison, their voices blending into a terrible harmony. For the great powers who rule the warp, for Lorgar, who showed us the truth. Odin stepped forward, placing himself between the advancing traitors and the ship's defenders. Up close, he could see the full extent of their corruption. Their armor was not simply painted, but had grown into their flesh, fusing man and machine into something that was neither. Demon faces leered from their shoulder guards, small warp entities bound into the ceramite itself. The symbols carved into their armor wept blood that defied gravity, flowing upward rather than down. "You reek of the warp," Odin said, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "I can smell it on you like rot on a corpse. You were men once, warriors who served a cause greater than yourselves. Now you are slaves. Puppets dancing on strings held by entities you are too blind to see." The Dark Apostle laughed, a sound like grinding stone mixed with distant screams. His helmet was shaped like a demon's skull, eye sockets glowing with unholy light. "We are free, stranger. Free from the Emperor's lies, free from the prison of mortality. We serve gods who answer prayers with real power, not the silent corpse on Terra who demands everything and gives nothing." He raised his Crozius Arcanum, a staff topped with a stylized book that burned with black flame. "And we have come for you, All-Father. Yes, we know what you are. The great powers whispered your name to us in the warp. They showed us visions of a king who rejected their generous gifts. Such arrogance cannot stand unpunished. You will kneel before the dark gods, or we will break you until kneeling is all you can do." Odin spun Gungnir in a deadly arc, the spear's path carved through the air, leaving trails of golden light that persisted for heartbeats after it passed. "I have stood against Surtur's flames and walked away. I have faced the combined might of Jotunheim's armies and emerged victorious. You are nothing but corrupted souls wearing stolen flesh. Come then, and learn what it means to face a true king." The word-bearers charged as one, their movements coordinated by years of combat experience and the guiding whispers of their dark masters. Bolt pistols roared, filling the cargo hold with explosive rounds. Chainswords screamed to life, their teeth designed to chew through armor and flesh with equal ease. The Dark Apostle began chanting in a language that predated human civilization, words of power that caused the air itself to crack and bleed. Odin met them head-on, and the cargo hold exploded into violence that defied human comprehension. Gungnir moved faster than the eye could follow, each strike precise and devastating. The spear's point punched through corrupted ceramite as if it were parchment. Word-bearers fell, their enhanced bodies unable to withstand the cosmic forces channeled through Asgard's greatest weapon. Where Odin's hand struck without the spear, traitor marines went flying, their armor crumpled by impacts that registered like artillery strikes. But the word-bearers were not easily defeated. They had fought for 10,000 years across countless battlefields. They knew every tactic, every weakness of lesser warriors. They spread out, attacking from multiple angles, forcing Odin to divide his attention. One swung a power maul that crackled with disruptor fields capable of tearing apart molecular bonds. Another threw a grenade that exploded not with shrapnel but with raw warp energy, creating a pocket of unreality that tried to drag Odin into the Imperium itself. The All-Father weathered it all with the patience of ages. He had fought in the wars of the Nine Realms for millennia. He understood battlefield tactics that these corrupted warriors had never conceived. When they tried to flank him, he was already moving to counter. When they coordinated strikes from multiple directions, he positioned himself so their attacks interfered with each other. His single eye saw everything, processed every movement, calculated every response with the wisdom of 5,000 years of combat experience. Inquisitor Thorn stood behind him, her bolt pistol barking steady fire. She targeted weak points in the word-bearer's armor, joints and seals where corruption had not fully fused the ceramite. Her shots found their marks with trained precision, each one forcing the traitors to adjust their attacks, creating openings that Odin exploited ruthlessly. They fought as a unit despite having never trained together. Warrior instinct bridging the gap between king and inquisitor. The Dark Apostle watched his warriors fall with growing fury. He raised his Crozius higher, chanting faster, his voice rising to a fevered pitch. The warp breach behind him widened, allowing more of the Imperium's madness to spill into reality. The temperature in the cargo hold dropped 30 degrees in seconds. Frost formed on metal surfaces. The remaining stormtroopers began to scream as invisible presences clawed at their minds. "You think yourself mighty," the Dark Apostle roared, "but you are nothing before the true powers of the universe. Witness the blessing of the Great Four. See what awaits all who reject their generous gifts." The tear in reality pulsed, and something began to force its way through. Not more word-bearers, but something far worse. A demon, a creature of pure warp energy given temporary form through the belief and worship of its followers. It was massive, easily 12 feet tall, its body a nightmare amalgamation of too many limbs and faces that screamed in languages never meant for mortal tongues. Its skin, if it could be called that, shifted between scales and fur and exposed muscle, never settling on a single form. The demon pulled itself fully into reality with a sound like reality tearing. Its presence caused the ship's lights to flicker and die. Emergency lumens cast everything in bloody red. The creature's eyes, and it had far too many of them, fixed on Odin with unmistakable hunger. "Draugr," Odin muttered, using the Old Norse word for the undead warriors who rose from their graves. "No, worse than Draugr, you have traded death for something far more terrible. You have given up your very existence to become puppets for forces beyond mortal comprehension." The demon spoke, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of the damned speaking in unison. "We are blessed, king of a dead realm. We have transcended mortality, we have become eternal. Join us, accept the gifts freely offered. Your strength would make you a prince among demons, a champion of the dark gods themselves." Instead of answering with words, Odin drove Gungnir through the deck plating beneath his feet. The spear sank deep into the ship's structure, anchoring itself with unbreakable force. Golden runes along its length blazed to life, each one a word of power from the ancient language Odin had learned during his sacrifice on Yggdrasil. The light spread outward in geometric patterns, forming a circle of power around him that pushed back the demon's corrupting influence. "I am Odin, son of Bor," he declared, his voice resonating with the Odin force itself. "I have drunk from Mimir's well and hung from the world tree. I have gazed into the spaces between life and death and returned with knowledge you cannot fathom. Your masters are old, I grant them that, but I am older in wisdom if not in years. And I tell you now, I reject everything you offer. Your gifts are poison. Your blessings are chains. Your eternity is slavery wearing a crown." He pulled Gungnir free and pointed it at the demon. "Return to the warp, creature. Tell your dark masters that this reality has defenders who will not break, will not bend, will not be corrupted by honeyed words and false promises." The demon shrieked in rage and launched itself forward, all its limbs moving in ways that defied natural law. Where it stepped, the deck plating corroded and warped. Where its claws swept, reality itself seemed to crack and bleed. It moved with speed that should have been impossible for something so massive, closing the distance to Odin in heartbeats. Their collision shook the entire ship. Odin caught the demon's charge on Gungnir, the spear's shaft absorbing forces that would have shattered mountains. Golden light and warp corruption met and warred, neither fully overwhelming the other. The demon's many mouths snapped at Odin's face, each one filled with teeth that dripped acid. Its claws raked across his armor, and for the first time Odin felt pain. Not much. Not enough to slow him, but enough to confirm that this creature could harm him if given the opportunity. He rolled with the demon's momentum, using its own strength against it in a throw that sent the creature crashing through a cargo container filled with ammunition. The resulting explosion would have killed anyone else in the hold, but Odin weathered it with only minor burns on his exposed skin. The demon rose from the flames, its form already regenerating damage that would have killed any mortal being 100 times over. They fought across the cargo hold, each exchange shaking the ship's structure. Odin's combat style was disciplined, efficient, honed through countless battles. Every strike served a purpose. Every dodge positioned him for a counter. He was not simply fighting to destroy the demon, but to understand it, to learn its nature so he could banish it permanently rather than simply dispersing its current form. The demon, by contrast, fought with wild abandon, throwing its power around carelessly. It did not fear injury because it could not truly die, not here in the Imperium. Even if its current form was destroyed, its essence would return to the warp to be reconstituted later. It had eternity to try again. But Odin was counting on that arrogance. As they fought, he chanted quietly in the language of runes, weaving a trap of pure will and cosmic force. The demon was too focused on the immediate battle to notice until too late. When Odin finally drove Gungnir through the creature's central mass, the spear did not simply pierce flesh. It anchored the demon to reality itself, pinning it in place with forces drawn from the spaces between worlds. The demon thrashed and screamed, unable to return to the warp, unable to dissipate its form. It was caught, held by magic older than the Imperium, bound by knowledge the dark gods themselves had not anticipated. Odin placed his hand on the demon's shifting form and spoke a single word in the old tongue. The word meant dissolution, unmaking, the return of complex things to simple components. Golden light exploded from his palm, flooding through the demon's essence. The creature's screams reached a pitch that shattered what remained of the cargo hold's viewing ports. Then, with a sound like reality sighing in relief, it simply ceased to exist. Not banished back to the warp, not dispersed to reconstitute later, but unmade, its component energies scattered across multiple dimensions, too diffuse to ever reform. The remaining word-bearers, witnessing this impossible feat, hesitated for the first time. Their dark apostle's eyes widened behind his demon skull helmet. "Impossible," he whispered. "No mortal can permanently destroy a demon. Even the Emperor himself could only banish them." "I am not your Emperor," Odin replied, breathing heavily from the exertion. "And I am not mortal in the way you understand mortality. I am something your dark masters did not account for, something from beyond the reach of your warp. That is why they fear me. That is why they sent you to capture or kill me before I could become a true threat to their plans." The Dark Apostle raised his Crozius one final time, gathering warp energy for a desperate strike. But before he could unleash it, the cargo hold flooded with new light. Not the bloody red of emergency lumens or the golden glow of the Odin Force, but pure white brilliance that burned away shadows and corruption alike. Inquisitor Thorn fell to her knees, her eyes wide with awe and terror. The remaining stormtroopers prostrated themselves immediately. Even the servitors, whose lobotomized brains barely registered human emotion, seemed to quail before the presence that had manifested. A figure stood in the center of the cargo hold, tall and terrible and glorious beyond words. It wore golden armor that seemed to be made of light itself. In its hands, it held a flaming sword that burned with fires that could cleanse or destroy with equal ease. The face was hidden behind a helmet shaped like an eagle, but the presence, the sheer weight of consciousness and will, was unmistakable to all who felt it. This was one of the Emperor's custodes, but not as they normally appeared. This warrior had been possessed, temporarily transformed into a vessel for a fragment of the Emperor's own consciousness. The God Emperor of mankind, imprisoned upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, had reached across the galaxy to manifest his will here and now. The word-bearers screamed in pain and fury, their corrupted forms unable to bear proximity to their father's presence, even filtered through a mortal vessel. They fled toward the warp breach, diving through it back into the Imperium rather than face the Emperor's judgment. The Dark Apostle was the last to go, his helmet turning back one final time to stare at Odin. "This is not finished," he hissed. "The dark gods are eternal. They will have you eventually." Then he too vanished into the warp, and the breach sealed behind him with a sound like the universe healing a wound. The possessed custodes turned toward Odin, and when it spoke, the voice carried harmonics that resonated through the soul itself. Odin, son of Bor, king of a realm beyond my sight, I have watched your arrival with great interest. Your rejection of the ruinous powers, your strength against their temptations, these things have earned my attention. Odin stood tall despite his exhaustion, meeting the Emperor's gaze without flinching. Then you are this Imperium's master, the God-Emperor they speak of with such reverence. I am what humanity needs me to be, the Emperor replied. Once I was a man, a warrior and scholar who sought to unite mankind and lift it to greatness. Now I am a corpse bound to a throne, suffering eternal agony to maintain the light that guides my people through darkness. I am less than I was, and more. I am humanity's shield, its guide, its last desperate hope against the forces that seek its extinction. Why manifest here? Odin asked. Why now? Because your presence threatens the delicate balance upon which mankind's survival depends. You are powerful enough to challenge my authority. Your very existence contradicts the theology that unites my Imperium. If word spreads of a being who rivals the Emperor yet follows no imperial creed, civil wars will erupt. Billions will die in conflicts over whether you are savior or heretic. I cannot allow such chaos, not when humanity already teeters on the edge of extinction. The Emperor's vessel stepped closer, the flaming sword still held ready. You will come to Terra. You will stand before me in my throne room, and there I will judge whether you are threat or opportunity, whether you must be destroyed or can somehow be integrated into humanity's desperate struggle for survival. Odin felt the weight of that judgment already pressing down upon him. This Emperor was no fool, no petty tyrant demanding worship for ego's sake. He was a being who had sacrificed everything, who suffered beyond mortal comprehension, who bore burdens that would crush lesser beings. Whatever else he might be, he had earned the right to judge. I will come, Odin agreed, not as a supplicant, but as one ruler to another. Let us speak plainly, Emperor. Let us determine if our purposes can align or if we are doomed to be enemies. The golden light faded from the custodes, and the warrior collapsed to the deck, alive but unconscious from the strain of hosting even a fragment of the Emperor's presence. Inquisitor Thorn rose on shaking legs, her face pale with awe at what she had witnessed. Direct manifestation of the Emperor was almost unheard of, a miracle of the highest order. Prepare the ship for immediate transit to Terra, she commanded, her voice hoarse. Maximum speed. The Emperor himself has decreed it. As the crew rushed to obey, Odin stood alone in the damaged cargo hold, Gungnir once more at his side. He stared at the sealed breach where the warp had tried to claim him. In his long life, he had faced countless enemies, overcome impossible odds, ruled with wisdom earned through sacrifice. But now he faced something new, something unprecedented. He would stand before another god king, one who ruled an empire spanning 1,000,000 worlds. And there, in that throne room on distant Terra, the fate of both rulers would be decided. Would they be allies against the darkness, or would only one leave that chamber still standing? Terra appeared before them like a jewel of gold and gray suspended against the void. But this was nothing like the earth Odin remembered from his visits to Midgard in ages past. That world had been blue and green, alive with oceans and forests. This Terra was a fortress, every inch of its surface covered in cities and defense installations that stretched from pole to pole. Orbital platforms surrounded it in layers, each one bristling with weapons capable of destroying fleets. The scale of human presence was staggering, proof of an empire that had endured for 10,000 years through sheer determination and sacrifice. As their ship descended through the layers of defenses, Odin observed everything with his single eye. He saw void stations the size of mountains. He witnessed patrol fleets that numbered in the hundreds. He felt the psychic presence emanating from the planet's surface, a golden light so intense it could be perceived even from orbit. That light came from the Imperial Palace, and at its heart, the golden throne where the Emperor sat in eternal suffering. The landing procedures took hours, each checkpoint requiring authentication and verification. Inquisitor Thorn presented credentials that grew increasingly rare and valuable as they descended deeper into Terra's controlled zones. Finally, they reached the surface at a spaceport reserved exclusively for the Inquisition and other high-ranking Imperial officials. From there, a heavily armored transport carried them toward the Imperial Palace. The palace itself defied description. It covered an entire continent, a structure so massive that its highest spires reached into low orbit. Gothic architecture stretched in every direction, cathedrals large enough to house entire cities nested within even larger structures. Statues of heroes and saints lined processionals that could accommodate entire armies marching in formation. Every surface was inscribed with scripture prayers to the emperor written in 1,000 languages across 10,000 years. Odin walked through these halls with measured steps, taking in the grandeur and the horror in equal measure. The statues were not merely decorative but memorials to the fallen, billions of names carved into adamantium and marble. The prayers were not simply tradition but desperate pleas for salvation written by people who had witnessed atrocities beyond imagination. This palace was not a monument to victory but a fortress built by survivors who refused to surrender despite impossible odds. At each checkpoint, they were met by different forces. First, the Imperial Guard, baseline humans in elaborate uniforms who stood at perfect attention despite the hours of duty. Then the Adeptus Arbites, the Emperor's law enforcement, whose armor and weapons spoke of authority backed by absolute force. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum where only the Adeptus Custodes were permitted to stand guard. The Custodes were unlike anything Odin had encountered in this reality. Each warrior stood 10 feet tall in golden armor that was more work of art than mere protection. Their guardian spears hummed with power fields that could cut through tank armor. Their eyes, visible through helmet slits, held intelligence and awareness that marked them as far more than simple soldiers. These were the Emperor's personal guard, his companions, each one a genetic masterwork crafted by the Emperor's own hand. The shield captain of the Custodes stepped forward, his armor gleaming in the light of 1,000 candles. Unlike the others Odin had met, this warrior showed no hostility, no suspicion. Instead, he inclined his head slightly in what might have been respect between equals. "I am Valoris, shield captain of the Adeptus Custodes," he said, his voice resonant and clear. "The Emperor has been waiting for you, Odin Allfather. He bids you enter his presence alone and unafraid." Inquisitor Thorn stepped forward, her hand rising in protest. "Shield captain, protocol demands that I accompany the prisoner. The security risk is too great." Valoris turned his gaze upon her, and Thorn actually took a step backward despite her decades of service and iron will. "The Emperor has spoken, Inquisitor. His word supersedes all protocol. You will wait here while the stranger proceeds to the throne room." There was no room for argument in that tone. Thorn bowed her head in acceptance, though her expression showed clear frustration. She looked at Odin one final time, her eyes carrying a warning and perhaps something else. Concern, maybe, or hope that this encounter would end with alliance rather than destruction. Odin nodded to her, acknowledging her silent message. Then he turned and followed Shield Captain Valoris through the final set of doors. They were massive slabs of adamantium inscribed with wards and prayers accumulated over 10 millennia. They swung open with impossible silence, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. The corridor was lined with more Custodes, each one standing motionless as a statue, their guardian spears held at perfect attention. Between them hung banners representing every Space Marine chapter, every Imperial organization, every world that had ever sworn loyalty to the Emperor. There were thousands of them, a tapestry of humanity's desperate unity against the darkness. As Odin walked, he felt the psychic presence growing stronger with each step. It pressed against his consciousness like physical weight, not hostile but overwhelming in its sheer magnitude. This was the Emperor's will made manifest, the focus of humanity's faith accumulated across 1,000,000 worlds. It would have crushed a normal mind instantly, driven even the strongest mortals to madness through pure intensity. But Odin had gazed into the well of wisdom. He had hung from Yggdrasil and glimpsed the spaces between life and death. His mind had been tempered by millennia of rule and sacrifice. He weathered the psychic pressure with gritted teeth and iron determination, refusing to falter even as his vision blurred and his single eye watered from the strain. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber so vast its boundaries were lost in shadow and distance. At its center stood the Golden Throne, a massive construct of technology and psychic architecture that defied mortal comprehension. Pipes and cables thick as tree trunks connected it to machinery that filled the surrounding space. Tech priests moved among the mechanisms like priests tending a divine altar, their augmented bodies reflecting the throne's golden light. Upon the throne sat what remained of the Emperor of mankind. His physical form was withered to near skeletal proportions after 10,000 years of unimaginable suffering. His skin was dried parchment stretched over ancient bones, yet he still wore armor of gold and crimson, and in his hands he held a flaming sword that burned with fires no mortal forge could produce. Most striking were his eyes, which blazed with golden light that pierced through reality itself, seeing not just the present but possible futures and alternate pasts. Ranged around the throne were more custodes than Odin had seen in one place, hundreds of golden warriors standing eternal vigil. Silent sisters of the anathema sororitas occupied strategic positions, their null presence creating pockets of psychic emptiness in the overwhelming sea of the Emperor's power. Servitors and tech priests worked constantly, monitoring life support systems that maintained the Emperor's physical form against the ravages of time and injury. Odin approached until he stood 50 paces from the throne, close enough to see every detail of the Emperor's withered face, far enough to demonstrate respect without submission. He planted Gungnir before him like a staff and met the Emperor's burning gaze without flinching. No words were spoken aloud. Instead, communication occurred directly between their minds, consciousness touching consciousness in a way that bypassed language entirely. The Emperor's psychic voice resonated through Odin's awareness, vast and terrible and infinitely weary. Odin, son of Bor, king of Asgard, I have watched your journey through my Imperium with great interest. You come from a reality beyond my sight, carried here by forces I do not fully understand. You possess power that rivals the Primarchs I created, yet you lack their origins in my own genetic craft. You resist chaos corruption as if it were trivial, though it has broken beings I considered incorruptible. You are an impossibility walking among mortals, and impossibilities in this universe rarely end well. Odin's thoughts formed a response that the Emperor perceived as clearly as if spoken. I did not choose to come here. I was cast out of my realm by forces manipulating fate itself. But having arrived, I will not stand idle while others suffer. That has always been my nature. I protect those who cannot protect themselves. I stand against darkness, whether it wears the face of frost giants or warped demons. Noble sentiments, the Emperor replied, and there was something in his tone that might have been approval or might have been sadness. But nobility without wisdom is merely self-righteousness. You have ruled for millennia, you claim. Then you understand that leadership requires more than good intentions. It requires sacrifice of principle in service to survival. It demands choices that haunt you for eternity, decisions that save millions by sacrificing thousands. The Emperor's consciousness expanded, flooding Odin with visions of the Imperium's history. He saw the Great Crusade when the Emperor had led humanity to reclaim the stars. He witnessed the Horus heresy when half the Emperor's own sons had turned against him, corrupted by chaos. He experienced the 10,000 years since, an endless war of attrition against enemies on all sides. Tyranids from beyond the galaxy, orcs whose numbers were infinite, chaos forces that corrupted from within, Necrons waking from ancient sleep, Eldar who saw humanity as primitives to be manipulated or destroyed. Through it all, he saw the choices the Emperor had made. Worlds burned to prevent chaos corruption from spreading. Trillions sacrificed to maintain defensive lines. Knowledge suppressed to protect the ignorant from truths that would drive them mad. It was a catalog of necessary evils, each one justified by the alternative being even worse. This is the reality I govern, the Emperor continued. A universe where compassion is luxury, where mercy can doom billions, where the only morality that matters is survival. Your power could aid humanity greatly, but your philosophy threatens the foundations upon which my Imperium stands. If you remain free and visible, you become an alternative to my authority. Cults will form around you. Civil wars will erupt between those who follow the Emperor and those who follow the All-Father. Billions will die in conflicts that serve no purpose but to weaken humanity before its true enemies. Odin absorbed the visions and the arguments, weighing them against his own experiences. He had ruled Asgard through peace and war. He had made difficult decisions that saved his people at terrible cost. He understood the burden of leadership, the loneliness of making choices that no one else could bear. But he also remembered what he had learned during his sacrifice on Yggdrasil, that wisdom required balance, that strength without compassion was tyranny, that survival without hope was merely prolonged death. You suffer, Odin said simply, and the observation carried no judgment, only recognition. I can see it in every aspect of your being. You burn yourself to maintain the light that guides your people. You endure agony beyond mortal comprehension every moment of every day. Such sacrifice demands respect. But I must ask, does your suffering serve a purpose beyond mere survival? Do you guide humanity toward something better? Or do you simply hold the line against the darkness? The throne room fell silent. Even the tech priests paused in their endless maintenance. The question hung in the air like a blade, sharp and dangerous. To question the Emperor's purpose was heresy of the highest order. Yet Odin stood unmoved, waiting for an answer that would determine everything that followed. The Emperor's response when it came carried a weariness that dwarfed even his physical suffering. I guide humanity toward survival, O Father. That is all I can promise in this universe. The dream I once held of elevating mankind to rule the stars in wisdom and justice died with Horus. Now I simply try to prevent total extinction, to buy enough time that perhaps someday my people will find their own path forward. Then let me help you, Odin said. Not as a rival or replacement, but as one who understands the weight of rule. You cannot move from your throne. You cannot walk among your people. You cannot see with your own eyes what has become of the Imperium you built. But I can. Let me be your eyes in the darkness. Let me seek out what has been lost and bring back what can still be saved. For a long moment, the Emperor's consciousness pressed against Odin's mind, examining every thought, every memory, every motivation. It was an invasion of privacy beyond anything Odin had experienced, but he allowed it, opening himself fully to the Emperor's scrutiny. If they were to work together, there could be no secrets, no hidden agendas. Finally, the Emperor's psychic voice returned, carrying something that might have been hope tempered by hard-won realism. You propose becoming my seeker, a wanderer with authority to move through the Imperium, investigating threats and recovering lost resources. It is a dangerous role. Many will see you as a threat despite any sanction I provide. The Inquisition will watch you constantly, chaos will target you relentlessly, and you will witness horrors that may break even your ancient spirit. I have witnessed Ragnarok itself, Odin replied. Or at least I saw visions of it before I was cast from my reality. I watched my sons die, my realm burn, everything I had built across millennia reduced to ash. If I cannot prevent that fate in my own world, then perhaps I can help prevent similar doom here. Give me purpose, Emperor. Let me serve in the way I know best. By seeking wisdom, by finding what is lost, by standing between the innocent and the darkness. The Emperor's consciousness expanded further, and Odin felt it reaching not just into his mind, but into his very essence. When it withdrew, something had changed. Not control or domination, but a connection. A thread linking Odin's awareness to the Emperor's own. Through that link, he could feel the Emperor's purpose, his desperate determination to preserve humanity against impossible odds. And through that same link, the Emperor could perceive Odin's intentions, his genuine desire to help rather than to rule. Very well, the Emperor declared, his voice resonating through the throne room and beyond, carried by psychic force to every corner of the palace. Odin All-Father, I grant you the title of Emperor's Seeker. You will have authority to move through my Imperium, to investigate threats, to recover lost resources, to stand against the darkness in whatever form it takes. You will answer to me alone, though you will coordinate with the Inquisition when practical. Your power is sanctified, your purpose aligned with humanity's survival. The custodes around the throne struck their guardian spears against the floor in unison, the sound echoing like thunder. The tech priests intoned blessings in binary cant. The silent sisters remained motionless, but even they seemed to acknowledge the significance of what had just occurred. There is one immediate task I would set before you, the Emperor continued. One of my sons, the Primarchs I created to lead humanity's armies, has been detected in the Eye of Terror. Impossible, as he was lost millennia ago and should be dead or corrupted beyond recovery. Yet the signal persists, calling out in ways only I can hear. Find him, Seeker. Discover if he can be saved or if he has become another weapon of chaos. Odin felt the weight of that mission settle upon his shoulders. The Eye of Terror he had learned from Inquisitor Thorn was a massive warp storm where reality itself had collapsed, where chaos reigned supreme and demons walked freely. To enter such a place in return was considered impossible for all but the most powerful or fortunate. Yet if a Primarch, a son of the Emperor himself, could be recovered, the impact on the Imperium's future would be immeasurable. I will find him, Odin promised. Though I walk through the realm of darkness itself, I will not falter. I have gazed into the abyss before and returned with wisdom. I will do so again. The Emperor's withered hand rose from the throne's armrest, a gesture of dismissal and blessing combined. Go then, my seeker. Take what resources you require. Choose companions if you trust any to walk beside you. But know that once you enter the Eye, you will be beyond my direct aid. You will face chaos in its purest form, where reality bends to the will of the dark gods. If you fall, I cannot save you. I do not ask for salvation, Odin replied. Only for purpose. And that you have given me. He turned and walked from the throne room, Gungnir once more at his side. As he passed through the corridor of custodies, Shield Captain Valoris fell into step beside him. I am assigned as your liaison to the custodes, Valoris said. Where you go, I will follow, to observe and to report back to the Emperor. Do not mistake this for lack of trust. Even sanctified, you remain an unknown quantity. The Emperor must know that his faith in you is not misplaced. I welcome the company, Odin said honestly. A warrior of your caliber will be useful in what lies ahead, and perhaps you can teach me more of this Imperium. Help me understand the people I have sworn to protect. In the palace's outer chambers, Inquisitor Thorn waited with barely concealed anxiety. When she saw Odin emerge alive and apparently unharmed, relief flooded her features. Then she noticed the custodes walking beside him, and her expression shifted to confusion. The Emperor has granted him the title of Seeker, Valoris explained. He is sanctioned to move through the Imperium on the Emperor's business. You will provide inquisitorial support as needed. Thorn's eyes widened, but she bowed her head in acceptance. As the Emperor wills. What is our first mission? Odin looked toward the palace's high windows, where Terra's sun was setting in a blaze of gold and crimson. Beyond that sun, beyond the safety of the solar system, the Eye of Terror waited like a wound in reality. Somewhere within that madness, a lost son of the Emperor called out across the void. We hunt for the lost, Odin said. We venture into darkness to recover light. And we begin by entering the one place in your galaxy where even your bravest warriors fear to tread. Far beyond Terra's orbit, in the depths of the Eye of Terror, something stirred. A warrior in Baroque armor, his body bearing the marks of 10,000 years of warfare, opened eyes that blazed with recognition. The call had been answered. The Seeker was coming, and with him perhaps the chance for redemption or the inevitability of damnation. On Terra, in the throne room now empty save for the Emperor and his eternal guardians, the God Emperor of mankind allowed himself something he had not felt in millennia. Not quite hope, for hope was a luxury he could no longer afford. But perhaps possibility, a chance that this stranger from another reality might accomplish what none of his own creations had managed. Perhaps this Odin All-Father, with his ancient wisdom and cosmic power, could find what was lost and bring it home. The Emperor's consciousness reached out across the galaxy, touching briefly on the thread that now connected him to his newest servant. Through that link, he sent a single thought, a warning, and an encouragement combined. Seek well, All-Father. The hunt begins, and the future of humanity may rest upon what you find in the darkness.